If you're joining us now, then that means A, congratulations, you survived another Thorgiween. Yay! Peach, clap along. Clap along, Peach. Close enough, buddy. And it also means that you didn't unsubscribe after my Swamp Thing review yesterday. Also good. Yay! So, this is part of the post-Shriek Out reaction, and it is another recent television show that we are reviewing. It just really is great timing that this thing ended in October. Almost like they planned it. But yeah, we're talking about Lovecraft Country, and this is the first time that a big popular show has been on HBO, and I've been able to watch it as it came out. Thank you, HBO now. Or HBO Plus? What?
HBO Max.
Max, thank you.
Max Plus...
Just
Ultra.
all of you. Hyper Turbo Edition 2. Oh, you just call it Stream. Disney Stream, HBO Stream, just all that stuff. We're fine. We can figure it out. Yeah, this show is really damn good. Holy cow. This thing, I will admit, I absolutely loved the first 2 episodes. But then after that, the show kind of lost me a bit. Because when I was watching this, I thought what the premise was in the beginning, and like that first episode was like, oh, this is what the entire season is going to be. And then they resolved what I thought was going to be the entire season in the very next episode. And then after that, it kind of felt like it was all over the place a little bit to me. I think the way I described it to you was it felt like they were trying to cram an entire season of American Horror Story into every single episode. But about halfway through the season, everything started to gel together, and I started going, oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, I feel like the first 2 episodes is to like establish like the atmosphere, like the theme, like the vibe, and then the next couple of episodes are like, okay, these are the segments that are going on. And then further along, it's like, now all these segments are starting to like come together, and we're gonna go into something really big.
Peach is staring at your hands.
Yes.
Why are
she likes to stare at her hands when we move them around.
You're too cute. We're trying to be spoopy here, Peach. Can't be cute and spooky. Oh, okay. Yeah, also you can't talk about very serious issues in this show.
Which is kind of sad because this entire series is a lot about...
Oh man, you can tell Jordan Peele was one of the executive producers on this thing. So is J.J. Abrams, which I will say this, I don't think J.J. Abrams is a very good director or writer, but he is an amazing producer. Because when you're a producer, all that means is that you have money and you go, hey, what's that idea you have over there? I like that idea. I'm going to give you the money to make that thing happen. And he tends to pick really good stuff. Like, all things he's directed, I'm like, I don't really know about that. But all things he's produced, like Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane, this series here, there was another thing he produced that I thought was amazing. Yeah, I always tend to look at those things and go like, oh my goodness, yeah, I don't really trust your writing abilities, but oh man, you can spot talent. So yeah, I am very impressed. But yes, so this show, as I said, it starts off and it is focusing on this one thing, which is this character named Atticus, although everyone just calls him Tick. He is returning home. Well, is he returning home now from the Korean War, or had he already returned home? It's hard to remember months ago when this thing began, because this thing went in so many different places.
I think he returned home from the war.
Because it starts with him on a bus, and I was like, is he returning home from the war on that bus? It's like, this is return trip home? I think it was. And
yeah.
Yeah, because everybody was welcoming him back.
Yeah.
Yes,
also,
okay.
like, if he was going into the war, I think there'd be, like, a bunch of other...
No, he wasn't... I'm not asking, was he going to the war? I'm asking, does this thing start when he gets back, or had he already been back for a while? But I think it was him coming back, because I remember people congratulating him. So, yes, he is returning back, and... You don't really get into it much, but things had clearly happened to him over there in Korea. And when he is returning home, he's discovering that there are certain things about his family that he had never really known. And he received a letter. I can't remember who the letter was from, though. Do you remember? It was his father, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yes, his father, because his father, man, I'm sorry.
A lot has happened in this season.
Normally when we review TV shows, we binge watch them all at once. We were watching this as it came out, so like this is 2 months ago that I'm having to remember like, what was the inciting incident of all this? The show is really good, everybody. Don't take my horrible memory as any kind of a judgment on that.
Also, like I said, like a lot of things happen in the show.
Yeah, as I said, every single episode feels like it could have been an entire season of another show. So, yeah, he gets a letter from his father who had gone missing in some area which he thought was called Arkham, and that's why the show is called Lovecraft Country, because he looks at it and says, yeah, my dad disappeared in Lovecraft Country, and they look at the letter, and it's him and his Uncle George, and his Uncle George is a guy, he runs a bookstore, but his main job is he's the guy who writes this book that details where it's safe for black people to go, because this is set during the 1950s, and
1960s.
1960s, sorry. Yes.
Yes, the Green Book.
Yes, essentially that's what it was. Yeah, and it's this book that is essentially like saying like, this is where it is safe for people to travel.
Like for black people to travel,
yeah,
specifically.
Exactly, and which already is a terrifying setting because you don't know where it's safe until you go to that spot. And I thought that's what the entire show is going to be. Them basically on this one road trip that they start at the beginning of this show, because they find this letter. He says, yeah, my dad, he's in Arkham, which I didn't think was a real place. His Uncle George looks at it and says, no, your dad just has a terrible handwriting. It's Arkham. And they look it up and they do find this one little town called Arkham. And they start traveling around, and the first episode is them and, oh god, I'm going to forget it. What was the woman who was with them? Her name was...
Liana?
No, Letty.
Letty. Yeah,
Letty.
I knew it was something that began with an L.
I knew it was with an L too. But yeah, I'm going to double check all of these names because I am terrible with names and I was relying on you to get them correct. And if you're not getting them correct, oh man. But yeah, so they all go off on this trip, and that first episode was one of the most tense things I have ever seen on television. And that was before anything supernatural popped up.
Yeah, like H.P. Lovecraft, like, other than, like, his, like, you know, horror stuff, he's well known for being incredibly racist.
Which is one of the greatest things about this show, is that you know that if Lovecraft somehow traveled to the present and watched the show, his head would explode. Yeah, I love that about this show.
So, when we both first watched this first episode, it's like, are the Lovecraft monsters just, like, metaphors?
It's a metaphor,
Metaphors for, like, racism? And then, like, the last, like, 5 minutes of the first episode is like, oh no, this shit is real.
Yeah,
this shit is real.
You know we're enjoying the show so much when we have to actually stop and take a break while we're recording because our excitement is freaking Peach out. Yeah, she had to get down on the ground because she was like, everybody's moving their hands around too much and it's driving me crazy. So yeah, we were like, okay, is this actually just a metaphor? And I gotta be honest with you, there's a lot of good creepy things that happened this season. None of them topped just them trying to drive out of town before the sun goes down and the sheriff is following them right behind. And it's not like it is this big crazy car chase. No, it's the opposite of that, which is what makes it so tense, because the sheriff is like, okay, well, you know what the speed limit is, and you also know this is a sundown county. You have to get out of here before sundown, and you better not give me a reason to pull you over again. So the sheriff is on their ass as they're driving out of town, and they know if they do not cross, it's almost like Sleepy Hollow. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, you gotta get over the bridge, otherwise the Headless Horseman will kill you. And like, they're just driving along, and they are looking at, like, the speedometer is at the exact speed limit. Like, they're going as close to breaking that speed limit as they can without actually doing it, because they know if they go 1 mile over, they're gonna get pulled over. And man, that was the tensest thing in this entire season, and it was real, and that's what made that brilliant. Mm-hmm. That's what made that sequence so good. But then after that, they end up discovering this, I mean, it's some big culty place. I mean, it literally looks like something out of American Horror Story. This is the first thing that made me think of American Horror Story, because I believe there was that season, oh god, I didn't see every season of American Horror Story, but there was that one that was dedicated to cults, and I remember there was, or no, maybe it was the one dedicated to witches, but there was some like big establishment like this. Might have been the one dedicated to the apocalypse. I think they reused that set for that. Whatever. As I said, my knowledge of American Horror Story jumps all over the place because I've seen only half the seasons and I didn't see them in order. So they get to this big compound and it's just full of just rich hoity-toity people, and which is the nicest way that I can phrase that. And they tell them that Atticus's bloodline is connected to the founder of this organization, and because of that, they need him for this spell, this ritual. Yeah, ritual is the word. And slowly, Atticus starts to learn more about his past, learns that they are connected to magic, they learn that magic is real, and that they're connected to it. And I kept thinking, holy cow, I thought it was going to take us a while to get to this point, but I guess we're already here, so the entire season is going to be them in this headquarters. Okay, no! End of episode 2, that place is burned to the ground, and now they have discovered Atticus's father, and they are going back. But Uncle George has, this is when we get into spoiler stuff, but yeah, from this point on, this is pretty much just for the people out there who have already seen this and want to hear us just talk about it.
Yeah, we don't really, like...
When it comes to TV shows, it is too hard to do spoiler talks on. I mean, it's too hard to not do spoiler talks or, like, divide it up. So I'll just go ahead and say this right now. I think this series is great. I think the way that it mixes real-world events and America's history with racism in with this supernatural setting is done incredibly well. I think the scares in here are great. And I mean, I was talking about this with Pywalker when we reviewed that, about how, yeah, the thing had no budget, but there are things that you can do to be creepy even when you don't really have a budget. And there is that one episode in here in which Dee is being haunted by those 2 little girls dancing after her. And man, that requires no special effects at all, and it's one of the creepiest things I have seen this entire year in anything. But yeah, I love all that stuff that I did. I love the variety of tones, how in the beginning it was weird how episode to episode it kind of jumped from one thing to the next, but once it all started to gel together, once I started to see what they were doing with this, and once I kind of got into like the flow of it, where it's like, okay, now this episode is going to be something completely different, I get this. Yeah, I really got into it, and I really started to enjoy it. The only real complaints I have with it is just only that this is a very personal thing, but I'm not the biggest fan of magic. Magic doesn't really do it for me in stories, and it's just simply because, like, I am that guy when it comes to magic that I'm like, wait, so what is that? Why is this thing happening? What is this? And when we got to that final episode, the final episode was great. There's a lot of big reveals and everything in there that I really enjoyed. But it all kind of revolves around a spell at the end, and I had no idea what was going on during that final spell. I just kind of looked at it like, okay, I know what you're trying to do, but why is this thing happening, and what is that thing that's forming, and what's this going? And it's just simply because, like, when it comes to magic, my brain just fuzzes over. I'm just like,
It's magic. There's no explanation. You don't need explanation magic. That's the only explanation.
I just like, it's one of those things that's like, what I'm saying is, if you are like me, and when it comes to magic, you just kind of like zone out, there are still moments in here, even when I was really enjoying it, that I was like, I can't follow this anymore right now. All right. And that final episode had a lot of that in there.
Meanwhile, I just like go with the flow, honestly. Yeah. Like, so if you're like me, I think you'll enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah. Again, still really enjoyed it. I will say that I find each of the characters to be great.
Oh, yeah.
I love the characters in here.
Like, each one gets a chance to shine.
There is one, Letty's sister, Ruby. I thought she was pretty much just going to be, like, a minor character, and then she gets, like, a huge episode dedicated to her. And like I said, this thing, it is not just supposed to be like a magical adventure. It is very heavily talking about racial issues in America and America's history with racism. And I thought the way that they kind of mixed all that stuff together was great. Like, I thought the way that they were able to have the supernatural element playing with the realistic stuff, I thought they did that incredibly well. And the thing that they do with Ruby in there, man, that entire episode is basically just, I'm not going to say a lecture because a lecture makes it sound like it's boring or anything. No, but it is a message, that entire episode, and it is one of those things that, you want to sit down and you want to just, like, soak all this up.
It's like, the one that got to me was the episode with the Hippolyta.
I knew that was, because, I knew that one was going to hit you.
She's the mother, and usually when you think of, like, a mom, you don't really think of her as, like, being, like, part of the main cast, more like the supporting character.
I was betting dollars to donuts she was not going to be a major character in here.
But she turned to be a very important character.
Big character. Like, she is one of the MVPs of this. And I mean, it starts off with, like, George going off on the trip with them, and you just looked at that, and you're just like, well, I guess we're not going to be seeing her anymore for the rest of the season. Bye. And no, she is a huge player in this.
And it's like, that's pretty much the whole point of, like, her episodes, like, she's tired of, like, being, like, overlooked and everything. Like, this was the episode where she's like, it's time for me to rise up and become the person that I've always wanted to be.
Yeah, and that was all great. Like, a lot of this show is supposed to be scary, but that was the one episode that it wasn't really meant to be scary. It was more of a science fiction rather than horror, which kind of makes this entire show feel less like it's meant to be like a horror series and more like it's meant to be like one of those old comic anthology books where like one week it's a big monster thing, but then another week it's a space adventure thing.
And it's funny you bring that up because the daughter is making
which is what makes me think this was entirely on purpose. That makes me think this was entirely done intentionally. That they were trying to go for that theme because, the Hippolyta's daughter, she makes her own little comics. And I feel like that is exactly what they were trying to go for with that, and that's even why they put it in there. Which, by the way, I will say, one thing I am very thankful for with this show is that now, after all these years, I know how to pronounce Hippolyta, because I always used to say Hippolyta, because that, for anyone out there who's a big comic book nerd like I am, that's Wonder Woman's mother's name. So you've seen that name pop up in the books before, but if you're like me, I always pronounced it Hippolyta. I didn't know it was Hippolyta, so wow.
Yeah, Greek words are tend to be like pronounced very differently.
But and the father has a huge reveal with him, and here's one of the things that I liked about this show is that everybody is flawed. Even you look at Atticus in the beginning. And in the beginning, he felt like he was going to be the most stoic, heroic character you have ever seen. But when we make the discovery about his father, you see this other side of Atticus, and at the period of time that this show is set during, I don't want to say it's an understandable thing, because no, it is a very prejudiced side of Atticus. But what I'm saying is, back during this time, it would not be surprising if the big hero of the story you're reading also had the same thoughts as Atticus on this. It's getting really hard to be vague on this. But and I am glad that this show was willing to come in here and go, yes, we know he's the big hero. He's also the big hero during the 1950s and 1960s. He's going to also be very problematic with something, and he's going to have many flaws himself, even if he's the hero. And we are not going to shy away from the fact that this was also a dirty side of America. There is hate in America's history that isn't just racism. There's hate in America that also goes to other groups out there. I'm trying so hard to be vague.
And this show does a good job showing that.
Yes, it does. And we get to see that. But also, I really like that when it comes to Atticus and this particular issue, you kind of delve into. You know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. We're getting into spoiler stuff in here. It is discovered that Atticus' father is gay, and you see Atticus is they do not shy away from Atticus's anger about this. But as it goes along, it kind of delves into Atticus was mostly just mad because his father was abusive and his mother was always the hero. So now he is looking at his father oh, so you didn't even love my mother. Were you cheating on mom all the time? But then you get those sit down conversations where his dad's no, I did love your mother and I was faithful to her this entire time. And I do like that this show, it does show the two of them bonding after this revelation is made, and even though it shows them bonding, it is a very realistic type of bonding, because it's not like Atticus has that one moment of oh, I realize that all my prejudices were false, and they were, oh, I was so wrong to think all these things, because in the real world, very rarely does anyone have that, that moment of like, oh, I realize I've been wrong about everything. But you see him like growing and changing to become better and growing to be more accepting. And I like that they kind of addressed it in a more realistic way, because that makes it feel more real. It makes his character progression feel more real. But as I said, I do like the fact that even though he's our hero, the show was willing to stop and turn to the audience and say like, no, he's got flaws of his own, and because he's our hero, it made that impact bigger, because it was kind of turning to the audience and saying like, hey man, even if you really like somebody, even if you really look up to them, they can still have a massive problem like this. They can still be prejudiced in a way that you don't know about. So it makes you kind of think in your head like, I shouldn't be afraid to look at people within my own lives and people who I know and people that I care about and realize, oh, they might actually be prejudiced about a thing, because that's how you actually like have these conversations and actually try and make changes in the world, is by realizing, oh shoot, there's people out there who have massive problems. So I thought that was a really bold thing that they did. And when talking about a show that is about the history of hate in America, I'm glad they did not shy away from like, hey man, there's lots of types of hate out there. Let's see, anything else to talk about in here before we get into like full-blown spoilers thing? Oh shoot, the witch, or whatever you want to call her. I'm sorry, I looked up people's names and then I completely forgot them all. But yeah, the daughter of the group that Atticus belonged to, come on, give me
like, she can't be part of the group because she's a woman.
Yeah, so again, it's talking about other prejudices in American history. Mm-hmm. Christina, that is it. Christina Braithwaite, I believe it was, yeah. They are not afraid to, kind of make her a little bit complex as well. And that's why I love it. Everybody in here is complex. Because there are so many moments throughout the series in which she is coming up to Atticus and she's like, yeah, okay, you killed them all, but you didn't kill me. But I have now placed a spell that you can't harm me in any way. And when this day comes, I need all of your blood. I need to kill you so that I can gain immortality. And so obviously she's the villain. Obviously you're looking at her and going, she is a bad person. She is the villain. But she's not like, flying around on a broomstick with a cat cackling. Like, there are many times in which she appears and you can just feel like a chill go down your spine, because she is just so cold and just so uncaring. But then there are many other moments in here where she is portrayed as kind of like, she actually develops a relationship with Ruby. And I actually, I had to stop every now and again and, remind myself, she's not being evil at this moment. She actually does care about Ruby. This isn't part of some big plan of hers. She actually does care at this moment. And there are other moments in which, the family needs help. They need help with magic. And even though Atticus knows she's going to try and kill me, she's the only one that they can call on. And she arrives and she tries to help them. She is this great... She is definitely the villain. She is definitely evil. But she is such a good, gray character. Because even if she's bad, there's so many times that
she's like a darker gray.
Yeah, exactly. She's a very dark gray. But they did such a good job of, portraying as, yeah, but I mean, she is the perfect, it's just business villain, is what she was. Listen, I just need your blood. I just need to kill you for this spell. That's all. I mean, I'll help you out with these other things that you need. Sure. As long as I can still kill you. It's such a weird character to follow, because there are those ones, the moment in which Dee, got attacked by those spirits, they had to call on her in that one scene. And you could tell they did one, and she shows up and she's trying to help Dee, and you can feel yourself wanting to root her on, because you want her to save Dee. But then you have to remind yourself, oh right, she's the bad person in this show. Yeah, I thought that stuff was great. I will say, this is going to be a very weird small critique, but considering that this is called Lovecraft Country, I wish there had been a few more Lovecraftian references. I will admit I have not read a ton of Lovecraft, and he's got a lot of smaller books out there that I am completely unaware of. So I'm sure that there's a lot of things in here that might have been references that I didn't get. I mean, he wrote Reanimator, and there's one episode in here that it's all about someone trying to like stitch together bodies and stuff and discover ways to use science to overcome the dead. It's like, okay, I think that was like a reference to it and you changed it enough to make it your own thing, but there's a moment in the very first episode in which Atticus refers to Shoggoths, and then Shoggoths appear. And I was like, okay, alright. Which, granted, I don't think they were technically Shoggoths, because he described Shoggoths as being creatures with a lot of eyes, but I never read the book that had the Shoggoths in, but I think Shoggoths also are like almost big blob monsters with tentacles as well. Then again, that's just a lot of
it's like that's creatures. The thing. Like a lot of like Lovecraft monsters are like constantly morphing and like changing. Yeah. So it's like it's hard to like capture that in an image.
Yeah, exactly. So it could be like the artist's interpretation of them as such. But yeah, I kind of
also I don't think this series has like the budget to do that kind of stuff.
I don't know. They did some really kick-ass stuff in here. I'm very impressed by what they did. So yeah, I wish there had been like a few more Lovecraftian elements in here.
Maybe there would be more in the second season. Yeah.
Absolutely. Also, one thing that I will say, this is like a legit complaint that I have, because there's a few things that I have like nitpicks with, but the one thing that I actually do have a complaint with is that when Atticus was in Korea, he fell in love with this woman. Mild spoiler on this one. We're gonna go into like full spoilers after this about like how the season ended and all that stuff. But mild spoiler on this one, it is revealed that she is a nine-tailed fox. She is actually this supernatural creature.
Like, not Kitsune. Like,
yeah, Kitsune is Japanese. This is specifically like the Korean version of it. Mm-hmm. But she still says it's a nine-tailed fox. So it is different. It's the same legend, but, different nationalities on that one. But yeah, as you mentioned, like, I had to devour the souls of 100 humans during sex, but then she ended up falling in love with him, even though he was going to be number 100, which would be what turned her into a real human being. But she starts to develop emotions, she starts to develop feelings, and again, you talk about like Atticus being how everyone in here has flaws. You see during the Korean War, Atticus, he's on the American side, but she's Korean, and they paint that Korean War from the Koreans' point of view. And yeah, she's going after Atticus because she wants to kill him because his entire troop did some things that, not gonna go into too many details, but he did some things over there that she wants revenge for. And again, it's about this entire show. It's not just racism, it's about the dark side of American history. And I like that this was coming in here going, let's now talk about like Americans at war and not just from the side of Americans. Let's look at it from the point of view of people that we're occupying the countries of at the moment. And again, a very bold thing to do. But it was just so odd to me that it's like, okay, Atticus, he gets back and all these weird, crazy, supernatural things start happening to him all over the place. But then it's revealed that also, even before all this stuff started, he was dating this spirit over in Korea. And
which I really like. Is like, it always kind of bothered me when like all this magical stuff just so happens to happen at this particular time, at this particular place, when it's like, there's an entire world out there full of who knows what.
Yeah, and I can understand that, but to me, it's kind of like, oh wow, so this guy just constantly has a history of running into these things. It's just so weird to me that it didn't just happen, that it's not also existing out there, but then also just happened to line up with Atticus. Like, it's all just attracted him. Like, that was my one thing, but I do get what you're saying about that. However, this is the part that becomes a real critique to me. When he gets back, there comes a moment in which she now comes to America and finds him, and she appears, and this is around the same time that a big revelation is made about Atticus and Letty, and it's like, oh shoot, and now all of a sudden his old love flame from Korea, she's here as well, and now he knows a lot more about supernatural stuff. How is all this gonna work out? And then she disappears until the final episode, and man, that drove me nuts. Because I kept looking at that going, there is so much you could do with that character now, especially with all the things that you guys now know, all the stuff that you could do, like, there's so much you could do, like, and just, even if you didn't use her in any kind of, like, a supernatural way, just go and talk to her, man. She came all this way, and she's got a lot of questions, and I'm sure now with all the stuff that you know, you have a lot of questions. Go and have a conversation. That is all that I want. And in the final episode, they do sit down and have a conversation, and I thought that conversation was great. I thought that was fantastic. but we needed more in between those moments. Like, there was a moment in which you see the entire cast of this show. They all load up into the car to go and drive back to Artem in the final episode, and she's there in the car, and I couldn't help but look at her and go, you really weren't with the rest of them for nearly long enough to really, because it was supposed to have like a family dynamic.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great what they were going for, but I couldn't help but look at her and go like, you were not in enough episodes to really feel like you fit in with the rest of these characters. So yeah, I thought that she was great, and I thought she could have added a ton in this show, but there's just so many like episodes of just her not being there when it feels like she should have been there. Like, it drove me nuts that she appears. Oh my goodness, what's going to come from this? Oh, like nothing for like 4 more episodes. Cool, great. Yeah, so that was my one big problem with the show. But let's go ahead and get into the spoiler stuff now.
Okay.
So, as we mentioned, Uncle George, as I stopped myself just before I mentioned it, Uncle George, in the second episode, he ends up dying, although I don't even feel like that's a spoiler.
Yeah, like
because I even said while we were watching the second episode, oh, he's gonna die. Like, that guy is too likable. This is a horror thing. He is too likable. I know how this works. And yeah, that guy, he ended up dying, which is a shame because he was the most likable character in this entire thing. I don't know how this show kind of show that like everybody has flaws. Uncle George didn't have any flaws. That's why he had to die. He couldn't exist within this show. Man, talking about flaws, I also really like, this is a small thing, but I did kind of like that, when it comes to, I almost said Hippolyta, I really enjoyed the exchanges between her and Dee after she gets back, because Dee, like, she thought she lost both her parents, after she also lost her friend, and all these other things, like, her life was just ruined, and, like, her mom, like, just disappeared. Like, she at least kind of knows what happened to her dad, like, she knows that he died. Her mom just leaves her and then disappears. She has no idea what happened. And then, like, Hippolyta, she goes on this big, crazy cosmic journey, and then at the end of it decides she needs to be a mom to her daughter. So she comes back, and I love that moment in which she has explained to her daughter, and to us, the people who are with Hippolyta, and we watch that, we're like, oh man, that's such a moving thing, and that is so important, and oh man, oh God, Hippolyta, she's got so much heart right there. That's, such a good thing for her to do. I love that when we saw this from Dee's point of view of Hippolyta, like, I was in a place where I could be whatever I wanted to be, but I knew that what I needed to be was a mother. I could have stayed there. I love that Dee just turns and goes, I don't care what you could have done. I love that moment because it shows, like, yeah, we followed Hippolyta. We saw all the amazing things that happened. From Dee's point of view, her mom just abandoned her, and then after this weird, crazy trip, decided she wanted to be a mom again. It's like, no, that's gonna suck. That's gonna sound really bad from Dee's point of view. I love that they did that. Yeah, it makes even Hippolyta feel like, yeah, you did kind of some shitty things with your daughter there because you were so obsessed with finding the truth.
Yeah, I like how they're actually building up Dee to become like sorry, my throat's kind of dry.
Yeah.
That building her up to be like an important character, like, because I mean, usually like when there's a kid in the show, they're just like there for like to like make things like cheer, like lighten the mood, kind of, you know.
I am seriously wondering with that final shot of the last episode, it's like, all right, are you setting her up to be the big champion of the series, or the big villain of the series? Because this could go either way. Because what happens in that final episode? Which, oh man, I have questions about a certain character. I have questions about what's going to happen to one certain character in this show. But in that final episode, they go back to Arm, and they had plans to basically do this spell that would make it so that they turn the spell against, I forgot her name again.
Christine or Christy?
Christina, yes.
Christina, yeah.
They were going to do the spell that would reverse everything back on Christina, but Christina uses this shape-shifting magic to disguise herself as Ruby, and Ruby appears. This was after Letty went up to Ruby and said, like, listen, I need you to do this. And again, this is one of the great things about this show. You follow a certain character, so you see what they're going through, and you think to yourself, "Oh man, yeah, everybody's on board with that character." But then it cuts back to another character who they weren't with them during that time. They just remember all the bad shit that they did, and they're not going to be on board with them. And yet, Ruby and Letty, their relationship is so divided. But you have seen how Letty has grown this season, and then she goes back to Ruby going, "Listen, I need your help. I need you to get me this thing in order to make this work." And Ruby's just like, "Yeah, you're just the same as you always were. You're only coming to me when you need a thing." Yeah, from Ruby's point of view, yeah, that's exactly what this looks like.
I really do appreciate like how the show makes you see everything from everyone's perspective, so you understand why they do and the things they do and how they feel and why they think those things and everything.
Yeah. But then Ruby shows up as they're all about to board the car, and she goes, "I got the thing that you need. I decided to help you out after all." And I kept thinking to myself, in order to get that thing, she was going to have to betray Christina, and the two of them are in a relationship, and I kept looking at that going, I have a weird feeling Ruby is going to, the thing that they need Ruby to get, she didn't actually get, and she's going to betray them. I have this weird feeling she's going to do that. And then there comes that moment in which they are setting everything up for the spell, and then Ruby is staring off, and she just mentions how it's nice. It almost felt like I almost understood what it was like to be part of a family there. And in that moment, I just went, oh no, I felt my stomach sink. I knew what happened in that moment. And yeah, it turns out Ruby's dead. And this is Christina using the shape-shifting magic to take on Ruby's form. Holy crap. Man, it was stunning, that moment in there. But, and again, this kind of speaks to how Christina, she's got different sides to her, because she said that she promised Ruby that she would not hurt Letty. So she ends up throwing Letty in this fight out of this window, and it looks like she dies.
Out of a tower.
Out of a tower, yeah. And it looks like she dies, but then Letty gets back up again a couple scenes later, and then you see this brief moment of Christina reciting this spell to give her invulnerability that we saw earlier in the season. And it shows us man, even though Christina is cold-blooded and she's going to do whatever it takes to get what she wants, she did care about Ruby, even though she killed her, because she was like, I will kill anyone I have to get what I need, even the person that I love, but if they made me promise to do a thing, I will still do that thing.
Yeah, it's I appreciate, a villain who has morals, or that they actually keep their promises.
Yeah, exactly. I've said this many times before.
Villain with standards, I guess. But I don't know.
I've said this many times before. Anytime you want to make the audience kind of like a villain, give them a code. That's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons why people like mob films. It's because the mob is evil, but they still have that code. So it's all right, well, I guess I can root for them for 2.5 hours here. All right, fine. Yeah, it is. It does show many sides to her, and I really enjoyed that. What the hell was I going to say? Shit, what was I about to say? Oh yeah. So then at the end of all this, the spell ends up going through, but they are able to still conjure up the reverse spell. Atticus ends up, this is when I get into that part where I say, I don't really know what happened here at the end. Because I don't know what the big swirling black thing was. I don't know how the Kitsune had to, not the Kitsune, it's not a Kitsune, the Nine-Tails Fox.
Korean Nine-Tails Fox.
I don't know why that was needed in the middle of this to connect to the dark. I don't understand how any of that stuff was working, because it's magic and I just don't get magic. But thing you need to know is that Atticus ends up dying, and I kept looking at it going, okay, no. They're not going to kill the main character. They're not going to do that. And they did it. He's dead. And I was stunned, and I kept looking at this going, I'm almost wondering if there might have been a rewrite or something that happened here, or if he was supposed to survive in one of the endings, and then they decided to change that. I don't know what happened with that. I'm also wondering, this is a thing which we have already seen spirits from the past come back. I am wondering if even if he's dead, if he's not done with the show. If he'll be back around as a recurring character, he's just a spirit now. Or maybe next season them trying to find a way to bring him back. As I mentioned, if you want to base stuff around Lovecraft, Reanimator. I already brought that back up, but that is a thing about someone trying to find a way to use science to bring people back to life. They could absolutely do that. So yeah, I don't think his story is completely done, but that dude has been cast in the Marvel films as Kang the Conqueror, which a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, I think he might be the next like Thanos. He might be he might be the next like really big deal. I had to double check that was Kang that he was cast as. Yes, like people were talking about. I was like, yeah, he's kind of like a big major villain in the Marvel universe, and he may be like the next. He might have like a career lined up after this as Kang the Conqueror. So I am wondering. That's why I'm saying like I wonder if this might have been a rewrite or something. But I think he got cast like too soon after this. Like I don't think that would have affected what happened at the end of the season. But if they had plans to maybe bring him back, he might be like, yeah, I don't know, I got this whole other thing lined up now, so maybe he might actually be gone now. I'm very intrigued to know how his future career in these movies might have affected what they had planned for him next season on this show. I still think he was going to die this season, but again, this is a series where you can totally bring people back to life.
Yeah. Like, I also consider, maybe, this season was, his chapter, and then, the next season will, focus more, on another character, and so on and so forth, or something.
I would be very intrigued to see, a lot of the talk of this was revolving around his son. Because we do know when he went to this time portal, he went to the future, and he found a book written by his son, and we do know that Letty is pregnant with their son, although we just know that they're pregnant with their child.
Yeah, we don't know if it's
a huge reveal, a huge twist that could happen is if next season we saw the birth of the baby and it was a girl, and now they're like, what the hell does this mean? That could be a very interesting twist. However, I do think I would be interested to see if maybe there might be some kind of a time skip, not a huge one, not we get to present day or something, but I don't know, 5 years or something, and now we see the kid, and the kid is, or maybe 10 years, the kid's a definite part of this series now. But the big question, as I said, at the end of this, Dee, who wanted to be an artist, her arm was destroyed by these two spirits, and now her mom is a super genius, and she ends up creating this steampunk cybernetic arm for her, and she ends up befriending one of the Shoggoths.
Yeah, I remember Atticus and his father were summoning something to protect them.
Yeah.
And the monster popped up out of the ground, devoured all the cops that were shooting them off.
That was a great sequence.
It was. So that's their guardian.
Their guardian, yeah. And what we see here now is that at the very end, Dee goes up to Christina, who she is buried under all this rubble, and she is just calling out for anyone to help them. And Dee just looks down at her and is like, oh, Dee, help me out. Come on, Dee, help. And then she just takes out the robot arm, grips her throat, and just she Rambos that thing. She rips that throat apart. And then you see her after, and cold-blooded, too. Just, doesn't care. No expression, no nothing. And you see her walk off with the giant demon Shoggoth pet guardian spirit. And I'm looking at that going, this could totally go either way. Because that was the villain. That was the villain of this whole thing. You gotta remember that was the bad person. So she did kill the bad person in this thing. And that Shoggoth is the one that helped them out. But on the other hand, the final thing we saw was this girl who always wanted to be one thing, was tormented until she couldn't be that thing anymore, had her arm ripped off and replaced with a machine by a mother who abandoned her to go to the future, and now she is with no emotions at all, ripping a person's throat out with a big demon sidekick. So it's this could totally go either way.
It could be either really a super awesome hero or a super awesome villain.
Yeah, this could go in either direction, and I am very intrigued to see what direction it's going to go, because another big theme of this season was all the things from black culture that white people have stolen over the years because they're basically saying like, yeah, white people use magic in this world, and we see like the cops are using it, we see this big rich family is using it, so it's kind of implied that like a lot of white people in America have been using it to gain power, have been using magic to gain power, but it's revealed, yeah, they stole that from black people, and at the end of this, they don't just reverse the spell back on Christina. She says that they shut all white people off from being able to use magic, and now black people can use it again, and like, oh, we're still in the middle of the civil rights movement right now, and now like all the cops that we saw using magic up until now, they can't use magic anymore, and we're like, okay, but now black people can use magic again. Oh man, are we about to do like a complete historical rewrite? Like, is that what the next season is? Is the next season going to now be like, oh yeah, no, we're going to like completely change history? Like, this was a look at American history. Now it becomes a what-if story. Like, just going off completely in its own direction. And I love alternate history stories. And I am going to be very interested in seeing what they do here. But that was my other question about this. Is that, and that's the other thing that makes me think, okay, I don't know what direction D is going on this, because it made me think, okay, well, if all white people now can't use magic, and this was a story largely about racism in America, who's the big threat of season 2 going to be? And which it could still be society.
Yeah.
It could still be like, yeah, okay, white people can't use magic anymore, but it's like, they're still running every corner of the government at this time. They're still like, you know, like, racism is still all over the place at this time. It could still just be society is the villain.
Yeah.
But
there can also be like an alien race out there who wants to like conquer Earth, and they could be the bad guys.
They would have to like, I think that would be like, they could do that, but like the story would have to be, because again, Lovecraft could absolutely be aliens. However, I think that they would have to do something with that where it's like, the aliens are a metaphor for this.
Yeah.
Like, it would not be just like, hey, bloodborne monsters are now coming down. It would have to be like, no, this is all a metaphor.
Yeah,
for,
exactly.
Yeah. So they could do something like that. But yeah, you got anything else to add to this?
No, it's...
Yeah, the show is really good, and I can't wait for season 2. I really am intrigued what's going to happen. I just can't believe how many characters they killed off. Because, like, okay, George, he was too good. We knew that was going to happen. But then Ruby, that was a bit of a shock. And then Atticus, how many characters do we have left? We've got Hippolyta, we've got Dee, we've got the dad, we've got Letty, we've got the Nine-Tailed Fox. That's still, like, I mean, that's still a decent chunk of characters.
There's also the unborn child.
The unborn child, yeah.
May or may not appear in second season.
So it feels like, and then as far as, like, recurring villains, Christina's gone. All those cops are pretty much gone. I'm very intrigued to see, like, there's definitely going to have to be a lot of new characters in it.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to have to be a lot of new characters. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing to think about where this could go. But yeah, thank you guys very much for tuning in. There is only one more review for the post-Shriek Out reaction. It's going to be coming up later today, and it's the conclusion to Werewolf Week, all in honor of the full moon tonight. And then after that video goes up, we've got the big top 31 video that closes down all of Thorgiween. I'm providing you with content all day today. So stick around, click that subscribe button, all those other things. You know what's going on. You've been with us for the entire month. You know what to do. Sorry, gotta refocus. I got one more review. Come on, we can do this. All right, I'm running on fumes at this point. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And as always, happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye.
We're slowly turning into those twins from the Overlook Hotel.